It was a Tuesday in March, the kind of Midwest day where the sky looked like wet cement and the sidewalks turned to gray mush under a layer of road salt. My shoes leaked through, socks already cold, and I had nowhere better to go. No job, no apartment, no family willing to answer the phone. What I did have was a bus pass bent from too many jacket pockets and the knowledge of which buildings kept the heat on without asking questions. That's how I ended up in St. Brigid's Catholic Church. The doors were unlocked. Radiators clanged like men coughing in their sleep. The air smelled like lemon cleaner trying to cover decades of candle smoke. Compared to the VFW hall where I'd been sneaking naps, this place felt like a hotel. I sat in the last pew left side, where both exits were visible if you craned your neck. My arms curled around a Dollar General coffee in a paper cup, lid soft from being reused all week. I let my body sag, eyes drifting shut. You've got the sight. Not a question, not even a hello. Just 4 words dropped into the air like they'd been waiting for me. I blinked awake. An older priest stood in the aisle, black coat draped over his collar, silver hair combed with stubborn precision. He had the posture of someone who'd buried too many parishioners, straight spine, grief lodged in the shoulders. "The what?" I croaked. "The sight," he said again. "You can see them, the ones that don't belong." He lifted a hand, pointed toward the far transept. At first, all I noticed was stained glass shadows crawling across stone. But the longer I looked, the less they looked like shadows. A figure that wasn't quite human, not moving, watching. My breath caught. The priest nodded like I'd just solved an equation. "Because you chose this pew. People with the sight avoid that corner, even when they don't know why." He slid into the bench beside me. His coat brushed wood, his hand set down a plain white business card. No name, no title, no crest, just a phone number. "There are echoes that don't matter," he said, "and there are others. That's why I need an apprentice." That word hit different. Foster care doesn't give you apprenticeships. It gives you empty folders and caseworkers who stop remembering your birthday. "Apprentice for what?" I asked. "For the work the church doesn't put on bulletins." His voice dropped. "Work that requires knowing the rules." He stood, coat flaring as he walked. At the end of the aisle he turned, eyes sharper than the stained glass behind him. "Show up tomorrow at 8, and do not eat salt after noon." Then he left me with a cooling coffee, a bent bus pass, and a white card that felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried. In the transept, the shadow I'd almost convinced myself wasn't real leaned closer. The office behind St. Brigid's looked less like a war room against evil, and more like a place where someone's uncle did taxes. The smell of Windex stung my nose, layered over years of paper and dust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, bleaching the crucifix on the wall until it looked more like a warning sign than holy. On the desk, a battered Green Bay Packers mug left a brown ring welded to its coaster. Father Brennan sat behind piles of envelopes. He thumbed through them with the casual speed of a man who'd done it too many times. 20 letters a week," he said. "Most of them grief or bad plumbing, but 3, he slid a stack toward me. 3 match the pattern. The first letters were nonsense, scribbles about bad dreams, creaking floorboards, voices that were probably grief. Then I found the others. Our son woke us speaking a language we couldn't identify. It sounded like Latin, but backwards. He draws circles inside circles. We can't stop him. Please help." I set the paper down, throat dry. "Why me?" I asked. "Why not the archdiocese?" Brennan finally looked at me. His eyes were calm but not kind. "Because official priests follow official rules, and official rules get people killed. He yanked open the bottom drawer of a squealing metal cabinet. Out came a fat folder bound by rubber bands. When he dropped it on the desk, the pages spread like a fan. Different handwriting, different stationery, but the same patterns. Kids speaking tongues no one taught them. Families finding dead animals arranged in circles. Bedrooms where the thermostat reads 70 but the air dropped 20 degrees like lungs inhaling frost. The office thermostat clicked. The needle jerked down. My skin prickled. "Those are the ones," Brennan said. "The echoes that bite." He pulled out a sheet typed in simple black ink. 1. Never touch the afflicted with bare skin. 2. If the afflicted stops breathing, continue the ritual. No medical intervention. 3. If the apprentice breaks any rule, they must take the possession willingly to save the victim. I read them twice. They didn't feel like protection. They felt like traps disguised as instructions. "Why no skin?" "Skin remembers," Brennan said. "Touch is an invitation. It won't leave once you give it that." And Rule 2. Just watch them die. They only look dead. CPR gives the entity time to anchor. You lose everything. And 3. His jaw tightened. "Insurance. If you fail, the child lives, but you don't." The heater ticked. The fluorescent buzz filled every pause. Then he slid me another folder. A family photo was clipped to the front. Parents, 2 daughters in matching pajamas. The younger stared at the camera with eyes too old. "The mayor's," Brennan said. "North Side cul-de-sac, minivan, Little League photos in the garage. She stopped English last week. Only backward Latin. Only eats white food. And she draws geometries that make adults sick to look at." He tapped the folder once. "Tomorrow night, our first case." The Mayer house sat on a cul-de-sac of patched asphalt and crooked mailboxes. Every window blazed yellow, porch lamps, basement fluorescents, even the garage bathroom glowed. Brennan killed the engine. They fight shadows with light. It never helps, just makes them feel safer. An HOA fine fluttered on the wreath, leaving Christmas lights up too long, petty ink against real terror. Brennan reached back for his black leather bag, then handed me thick rubber gloves, the kind surgeons would use if surgeries involved barbed wire. "Put them on." Rule 1. The gloves squeaked as I tugged them over. My fingers felt clumsy, slow. "And don't use your real name," he added. "If it learns it, it can mimic you. Once it speaks with your voice, hesitation will kill us." The door opened before we could knock. Mrs. Mayer stood there. Hair pulled into a bun that had stopped caring days ago, dark circles bruising her eyes. "She hasn't eaten since yesterday," she whispered. "Won't leave her room, just sounds." The staircase was lined with sheets of printer paper taped edge to edge, spirals, cul-de-sacs, black crayon pressed so hard it tore the fibers. In the center of every page, a child stick figure with hollow eyes. "We take them down every night," she whispered. "They're back by morning. We hid the crayons. They still appear." My ears popped as we climbed. The air felt denser, like descending into water. Brennan knelt, pulled 3 white candles, lit them in a triangle on the hallway carpet. Shadows stretched wrong angles against beige walls. "Downstairs," he told her. "No matter what you hear, don't come up." She vanished down the stairs, leaving us with silence. Brennan slipped on his gloves, handed me another pair. "Don't remove them until we're back in the car." The noise seeped from behind the door, not singing, not speech. Something in between, like Latin dragged in reverse. Brennan whispered, "Ready?" I nodded, though I wasn't. He opened the door. Rebecca sat cross-legged on the carpet, pink pajamas stained gray, her eyes locked on mine, too old for 8. "Don't respond," Brennan whispered. He began chanting Latin. Rebecca giggled. Then dozens of voices laughed from her mouth. She stood, spun slow circles, the laughter deepening until it was inhuman. Frost spidered across the window glass. Then she collapsed. Her chest didn't rise. "She's not breathing," I whispered. "Rule 2, Brennan snapped. Continue." The furnace downstairs roared. Up here the air stayed freezer cold. My breath came white, visible. Rebecca's body lay limp, lips gray. "Rule 2, Brennan barked, never stopping his chant. Sweat ran despite the chill. I counted in my head, 30 seconds, a minute, 2. Her lips turned the color of sidewalk salt. My hand twitched toward her shoulder. The glove squeaked. "Don't touch her," Brennan shouted. My hand froze. The silence stretched too long between heartbeats. The chant drilled on, guttural, static against drywall. Then Rebecca's eyes snapped open, black as tar. Her smile stretched wrong, and in my cadence, my exact drawl, "So close." When Rebecca whispered "so close" in my own voice, the sound didn't just creep me out, it hollowed me. I'd heard my drawl, my lazy vowel drag, but coming out of her mouth it sounded like my voice had been stolen, put on display. I staggered back, knees giving out. My gloves squeaked as I pushed myself off the carpet. A static itch crawled under the rubber, deep into the skin, like my body already knew I'd crossed a line. "Keep chanting," Brennan barked. His Latin jagged, hurried. "Don't let her in." But I'd already let her in. My sleeve brushed hers. The rubber barrier didn't matter. A charge snapped through me, cold and hot at the same time, like touching a live wire in a winter storm. My vision flashed. A man screaming in a stone corridor, children whispering backwards prayers, a crucifix bending like it was made of wax. Rule 1 was broken. Rebecca sat upright, her head tilted at an angle too sharp for human necks. When she spoke again, it was my voice. "Hello." It wasn't parody, it was exact. My inflection, my rhythm. Brennan's chant cracked. Sweat ran down his jaw, his lips trembling but still forcing Latin out. Rebecca's mouth pulled wider. A faint tear opened at the corners of her lips, but she didn't bleed. "You sound afraid," she said, "just like the others." I couldn't help it. "The others." Her grin sharpened. 27 apprentices. The number stuck to me like ice water. Rebecca began reciting names like a parish roll call. Johnson, Keating, Mayer, Collins, Dalton, Price. Each one fell with the weight of a funeral bell. Brennan's Latin faltered. His eyes darted at me, pleading not to listen, but the names kept coming. Harper, Jennings, O'Malley. Right. I'd seen some in county obituaries, others in faded bulletins thumbtacked to church doors. Rebecca's voice softened into my cadence again. "Do you know what Rule 3 really means?" I shook my head, but she didn't need the answer. "Insurance, that's what he calls it." She jerked her chin toward Brennan. "But not for you, not for the child." My stomach dropped. If the apprentice breaks a rule, they must take the possession willingly. Her eyes glimmered black. "You're the sponge. The one they throw away so the family can keep their daughter. 27 before you, all forgotten." Then she leaned closer. Her whisper was colder than the frost spreading on the walls. "You were chosen because no one would miss you." The gloves suddenly felt paper thin. And I realized for the first time I wasn't only afraid of her. I was afraid of Brennan. Brennan's chanting snapped off like a radio cut. Silence throbbed. Then his hand went to the leather bag, not for oil, not for crucifix, for a knife. Not ornate, not holy. A buck knife you'd find in a farm supply store, blade heavy, steel etched with deep circles and lines that shimmered like they didn't want to stay still. Rebecca clapped once, delighted. "Tell him, Father, tell him your little loophole." Brennan's jaw clenched. He dragged a coffee-stained napkin from his pocket and wiped the blade, though it was spotless. "Rule 3, he muttered, requires the apprentice to take the possession willingly. That's how the thing survives, on consent." My chest tightened. But if the apprentice dies unwillingly, sacrifice, the chain breaks. The entity gets nothing, the victim lives. I stared at him. "You mean kill me?" His eyes flickered apology, sorrow, but no denial. Rebecca laughed, glass bottle sharp. "Perfect. The priest who preaches sacrifice finally makes one." Brennan's knuckles whitened on the hilt. His voice wavered only once. "Forgive me." The blade rose. I didn't think. My gloved hand shot up and caught his wrist. The blade froze inches from my chest, candlelight crawling over the etched symbols like fireflies. "Wait." My voice cracked. "The rules aren't yours." Brennan's eyes wavered. Doubt showed for the first time. Behind us, Rebecca laughed like tape unraveling in reverse. The hallway papers trembled, black spirals twitching in candlelight. "You think you know better," Brennan hissed. I don't think I saw. The static from Rebecca's touch replayed memory-raid glimpses. Father Morrison choking on his own Latin, black veins crawling his neck. Father Ollie's hand slipping bare against a child's arm, eyes going black in an instant. Priests half-possessed, passing rules down like poisoned scripture. Not safeguards, not holy wisdom, just bait. "Look at them," I said. "Rule 1 ties us in. Rule 2 makes us let kids die. Rule 3 guarantees sacrifice. They're not protections, they're traps." Outside, through thin winter glass, I heard it. Faint AM preacher static drifting from a neighbor's garage, sirens far away. Normal life grinding on. Brennan's grip faltered. His face went bloodless. Rebecca's laughter cut. The house seemed to exhale, walls bowing inward. The candles guttered low, wax drowning into the carpet. For the first time, the entity wavered. Mayor House exhaled. The air grew heavy, pressing against my lungs like wet wool. Then came the hum. It started under the floorboards, subtle as a truck idling down the street, rose into the drywall, vibrated in the window panes until my teeth buzzed. I staggered to the curtain and peeked through. The cul-de-sac was awake. Neighbors stood in the snow, still as statues. Porch lights painted their faces pale. Ring doorbell cameras blinked red in unison, like mechanical pupils. Every bulb flickered in rhythm as though the block had a heartbeat. Their fogged breath rose together, synchronized like a choir warming up. "They're not really here," I whispered. "She's pulling echoes." Rebecca giggled behind me. Her smile was too wide, her eyes tar black. "The ritual is theater," she crooned. "The chant is a stage. We only need an audience." Brennan's Latin poured out, but the sound was hollow. It blended with the hum, background noise to the wrong music. And I realized the chant was never for the entity. It was for him, for priests to fool themselves into thinking they mattered. "Stop," I hissed, grabbing his shoulder. "It doesn't care about Latin, it cares about the story." His jaw tightened. "Then what?" "Names," I said, my throat raw. "It used names to anchor me, that's how it binds, we break it the same way." I shouted the first. "Johnson." Porch lights faltered. "Keating," "Mayor," "Collins." The hum staggered. Neighbors blinked like waking from a dream. Rebecca shrieked, windows rattling. "Harper, Jennings, O'Malley, right." Brennan caught on, his chant collapsing into English, blurting names of dead apprentices. Ollie, Morrison. Rebecca arched backward, mouth yawning too wide. Then she gasped, air flooding into her lungs. Her first honest breath. Rebecca slumped sideways, chest heaving. The sound was raw, human. Brennan sagged against the wall, crucifix shaking in his grip. Headlights cut through the curtains. Red strobe washed the hall. EMTs burst in. Boots tracked snow over curling paper spirals. 8-year-old female, Brennan croaked. She stopped breathing. She's dehydrated. The first EMT cut him off. Practical, flat, already sliding an oxygen mask over her face. Stable pulse. We'll take her in. The gurney rattled across hardwood. Straps snapped, buckles clattered. The ambulance diesel engine growled outside, exhaust clouding against the night. Neighbors on porches turned away, pretending they hadn't just stood in formation. Brennan's hands shook so hard the crucifix fell to the floor, his face gray. "You broke Rule 2, he rasped. "You let them intervene." "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "And she's alive." His eyes locked on mine, fury and fear twisting together. "You don't understand what you've done. The ritual." "No," I said, hearing the gurney thump down the porch steps. "It was finished, just not your way." He turned away, collapsed into a kitchen chair. His shoulders sagged under a weight no Latin could carry. I flexed my fingers in the rubber gloves. A cold spot lingered on my wrist, right where Rebecca had almost touched me. No amount of shaking made it leave. The ambulance carried Rebecca away. Sunday came, Midwest quiet. At the edge of the county fairgrounds, the Ferris wheel stood skeletal against the sky, a ribcage of rust. Frozen tire ruts scarred the gravel lot. The air smelled of old diesel and fried dough that wasn't there. I walked past the whistle tower of the shuttered factory. 10 years since it last blew, but on the wind I swore I heard a faint shriek, like machines remembering. Lunch at Culver's. Butter burger grease clung to my coat while families dipped fries in custard under fluorescent lights. Parents pulled kids closer when they caught me staring too long. Later, in a laundromat, quarters clinked, dryers hummed. An old man and his granddaughter played chess at a plastic table. She tapped each pawn before moving it. Little rituals that were hers alone. The church bell at St. Bridget's stayed silent. That night in my cot at the shelter, the cold spot on my wrist pulsed. Then the whisper came. Not in Latin, in English, my voice, but softer, kinder. "We don't need harsh rules anymore. We can write new ones. Kinder ones, no pain, just small promises. Say yes to the small ones." I pressed my wrist against the wooden frame until it hurt. The whisper ebbed, but the cold lingered. Next morning, the mailbox at St. Bridget's had a letter. No stamp. Just my name. Inside, an address. A time. Another case waiting. Friday night. Basement of St. Paul's Lutheran. Fish fry night. The place smelled like grease, coleslaw, and bingo ink. Styrofoam plates stacked high, fillets dripping oil through napkins. Kids squeaked across linoleum floors. Old men argued basketball in Packers jackets. At the far end, a bingo caller spun the cage. B31. Numbers clattered like tiny white planets. Ordinary. Too ordinary. Brennan appeared beside me, collar crooked, hands trembling around a styrofoam cup. "Table 8, he muttered. "Widow, everyone says grief, I don't think so." She sat alone, plate untouched, hands folded too perfectly. "Rule 1, Brennan whispered, no bare skin. But in here everyone touched, hugs, handshakes, kids tugging sleeves. The entity had chosen the worst possible place, community. As we neared her, the hum began. Low, deep, beneath the chatter. The woman tilted her head and smiled directly at me. My wrist went cold. I remembered the cul-de-sac, the names, the handshakes. Maybe touch in isolation bound you, but touch in community shared, named, multiplied, might cut it loose. I thrust out my gloved hand. "Evening, ma'am." She hesitated, the hum cracked. Around us people noticed. Neighbors followed suit. Palms clapped together across the hall, grease-stained, calloused, human. The hum faltered. Someone shouted her real name. Others joined in, calling it louder. Names layering over bingo numbers. Her body convulsed. The untouched plate slid, fish smacking linoleum. For a breath she sagged, human again. Then her head snapped up, eyes black, smile stretching. The entity fled like smoke streaking across the basement, straight into someone else. The kid spinning the bingo cage. By the time we traced the entity from the fish fry, it had moved where everyone could see it. Friday night under the stadium lights, the only cathedral that still filled up in November. Aluminum bleachers groaned under the town. Blankets draped over knees. Steam rose from paper cups. The brass section blared the fight song a half step off while the air thickened with fryer grease and nacho cheese that never cooled. Kids ran the railing with homemade signs and face paint that flaked onto mittens. Every light burned so white it made the sky look blacker. The bingo kid, 16 maybe, all elbows and bad confidence, stood at the 50 with a microphone. Helmets dangled from hands on both sidelines as players waited for cues that weren't coming. The PA system squealed feedback so hard the crowd winced. "Names," he hissed, and the sound warped through the speakers into a howl. "Give me your names." The bleachers fell quiet. Then the hum began, deep in the ribs of the stands, shivering through soda cups and purse zippers, rattling aluminum like a tuning fork. Brennan arrived shoulder to shoulder with me at the gate. His crucifix drooped from his hand, no strength behind it. Sweat beaded on his temple in cold air. "This is wrong," he muttered. "It's too public." "Maybe that's the point," I said. The cold spot on my wrist pulsed in time with the stadium lights. "It feeds on theater. Let's give it one it can't direct." We shoved past band parents and booster club jackets down to the rail. The kid at midfield lifted his arms like a conductor. The noise spiked. Somewhere the concession pump chugged and coughed cheese onto chips. The brass faltered, trying to find a pitch to fight the hum and failing. The mic boomed again, layered voices bleeding through the kid's larynx. "Willing sacrifice." "Not tonight," I yelled, climbing 2 rows up so my voice would carry. I cupped my hands to my mouth and let the first name crack the field. "Rebecca." It snapped like a dry branch. Heads turned. Someone 2 sections over shouted another name, raw, scared, real. Then a father bellowed his boy's name. Then a girl shouted her friends. Names rolled over names like the town remembering itself. The hum faltered. "Louder," I shouted, my throat tearing. "Say each other." The brass band understood before the adults did. The drummers started a marching cadence, messy, pounding, alive. Trombones blared long tones until they found a wicked harmony that sliced through the wrongness. The crowd's hum twisted into a counter chant, names bouncing off aluminum, amplified by winter air. The kid at the 50 dropped the mic. It thumped and fed back so sharply people flinched. His eyes flickered black to white to brown, like someone fiddling with color balance. He crumpled, gasping the way a swimmer does when they break the surface late. The stand split, half cheering, half screaming. Coaches swarmed. EMTs sprinted with a red bag that had tape over the zipper. The band stumbled into silence. The hum died like a generator shutting down. Brennan jerked me back from the rail. His fingers dug into my coat sleeve hard enough to bruise. In the floodlights his face looked older than St. Bridget's brick. "You don't understand," he said. His breath smoked fast. "This isn't victory." "Then what is it?" "The chain," he whispered. "Ollie, Morrison, me." His voice shivered. "It didn't just ride our victims, it rode us. The rules taught us how to be its couriers. Why didn't you stop? I demanded. He swallowed. Because once, he couldn't make himself say it, so he forced the memory through his jaw. Once I raised the knife, over a boy I'd taught to wear the gloves. I didn't bring it down, but I heard the steel in my head for a year. And after that, I told myself the rules were all we had. He looked at me like a man counting exits in a burning room. And now, he squeezed my sleeve. Now it is you. The siren wound up. The crowd poured toward the aisles. The stadium lights hummed one long note that felt like a dare. I didn't want his confession, but I needed it. A week later, Brennan stopped coming to morning mass. His door was locked. The secretary said he was on retreat, which in priest speak could mean prayer, rehab, or a couch with the blinds shut. So I went where priests rarely go, where paper outlives people. The county archives lived in a sagging courthouse no one had the budget to restore. A brass plate still read prosecution over the door that now led to stacks of old tax books. The air tasted like dust and ozone. Every metal drawer I touched stung me with tiny static shocks, as if the building resented being asked to remember. The front desk clerk wore a cardigan with ginger cats chasing yarn across the chest. She didn't look up from her word search when I asked about Dios and microfiche. Third cabinet, she said, but the reader's fussy. Don't jiggle the lever or we're waiting 2 months on a bulb. I cranked through reels until the world narrowed to scratching spindles, inverted headlines, and the blue fluorescence of a machine that hummed warmer than the radiators. Parish bulletins in a dozen fonts, letters from fathers to monsignors to bishops about roofs and collections, and a boiler that failed the inspection again. Debt crawled everywhere on those pages. Repair bills, legal settlements, invoices initialed in the margins with a shrug you could feel from 40 years away. Then I started finding envelopes with red wax seals. Some had never been slit. They weren't filed, they were tucked where the archivist's eye would slide past. I used my fingernail, wax flaked like dried blood. Inside, lists, not of donors, not of saints for feast days. Names of boys written in careful type with ages and parish assignments that didn't match their letters to the editor. Notes in cramped cursive. Good candidate, no family, aged out of placement, quiet, compliant. Apprentices. The rules hadn't been tradition. They were policy. By midnight, I'd filled a spiral notebook with what didn't deserve to be called rules anymore. I wrote 3 lines that felt more like doors than law. Consent is the lock. It can't walk through you unless you let it. Sometimes it makes you want to. Truth is the key. Lies give it shape, naming breaks its costume. Community is armor. Alone, you're bait. Together, you're choir. On the back of the notebook, I sketched a counter-ritual so plain it looked like a shopping list. When it shows itself, you read the names of its victims out loud. You pull the curtain. You refuse the stage. No Latin, no sacred props, just the truth together until something breaks. I reached for one more reel, the kind of last spin you promise yourself will be the last, and the reader flickered. Lines rippled. A document slid into focus that shouldn't have been there, dated with a clerk's neat numbers and a rubber stamp that said received 20 years ago. A list of apprentices slated for discretionary mentorship. Typed clean, alphabetized by last name. I saw my name where it didn't belong, inked when I was still a kid in a different county sleeping in the back seat of a caseworker's car. I stared at the letters until they stopped meaning sound. Someone had chosen me on paper before I ever chose a pew. The machine hummed harder, like it knew I was seeing something it planned on me never finding. My hand left sweat on the knob. I shut the reader off, and the room went dark enough that the red exit sign looked like an accusation. We booked the town hall basement for community updates. Everyone heard free coffee and came anyway. The room smelled like Folgers and damp coat sleeves. Fold-out chairs squealed across linoleum. A bake sale table sagged under brownies cut in irregular squares and cookies that had more sugar than structural integrity. Someone taped a trash bag over a leaking ceiling tile, and no one pretended it would hold. A guy from the county reads salt truck routes off a clipboard. A school board mom asked for volunteers to count raffle tickets. Nobody left. They were waiting for me because by now I'd become that thing this town knows. The person who stands up when something strange is happening and says anything in a voice that doesn't shake. They handed me the mic. The duct-taped cord squealed feedback that made babies cry. I held up the white business card Brennan had slid to me in the back pew weeks ago. Blank except for a number. The sort of thing you burn when you break up with a life. These, I said, aren't holy. They are bait. You could feel a shiver run through the folding chairs without any air moving. A man in a seed company hat crossed his arms, not ready to believe anyone in a collar could be wrong. A teenager by the coffee urn leaned forward like I was confessing something he'd suspected in his bones. They gave us 3 rules, I said. No skin. Keep chanting if the kid stops breathing. If the apprentice slips, they take the thing willingly so the child survives. I dropped the card in a styrofoam cup, struck a match, and let the flame chew it into a curling black petal. Smoke singed my nose. Those rules weren't protection. They were theater the entity wrote for us, and every time we followed them, we fed it. Someone whispered Jesus. Someone else said language and then realized it didn't make sense. I pulled a rubber-banded stack of new cards from my jacket, not printed, handwritten, uneven. Consent is the lock, truth is the key, community is armor. I passed handfuls down the aisles, wallets opened. Bibles slid aside so the cards could tuck into the back where funeral cards live. We don't do silence anymore, I said. No secret rites. No Latin meant for theater. When it comes, we say the names out loud. We call each other back. We break the script. For a minute, the room thrummed with that dangerous thing. A group deciding to believe the same true thing at the same time. It vibrated the ceiling tile. It made the coffee taste like more than water. The lights flickered. The mic hissed. Then my voice, layered and doubled, came out of the speaker from a mouth that wasn't mine. Yes, it said with a sweetness I've never had. Community, truth, new rules, let me teach you better ones. Chairs scraped, people clutched the cards. A few dropped them, paper skidding under boots. I looked down and the red light on the mic stared back like an eye. Get out of it, I said into the grill, throat steady by force. You invited me, it purred, my lilt, my rhythm, a version of me that never lost his temper. When you told them your rules, you opened the door called authority. That door is mine. I can wear it better than he ever did. The ceiling tile bag popped a little from the pressure. A brownie tumbled off the plate and face planted, frosting first. Say the names, I told the room without the mic. All at once. A woman near the back spoke first. She said her husband's name like a prayer with teeth. Then a coach barked his own boy's name like a challenge. A little kid whispered her grandma's. It built the way good things do, too slow, then suddenly so loud you realize you've been waiting a decade to hear it. The speaker spat static like a cat. My voice tried to crawl up out of it again, but the room drowned me out with itself. The entity didn't leave, but it lost the mic. It hated that. It hissed through me instead. Not words, but pressure, like a migraine wearing a coat. My wrist burned cold where the mark lived. For a second the room narrowed to a tube and my knees went liquid. Brennan's hand found my shoulder. I hadn't seen him come in. He didn't take the mic. He didn't raise a knife. "I'm sorry," he said, not to me only but the whole room, and it sounded like something inside him finally let go. The lights steadied. The crowd stood there holding little white cards like it made a difference. It did. I took the mic back up and the only sound in it was hum. The entity, denied its favorite stage, went looking for another. January made the lake a black sheet with veins of pale blue tangled under the surface. When the wind came hard out of the west, the ice groaned down its length like a body adjusting in sleep. Trucks sat with headlights pointed inward and nobody drove out, not even the long-time men who trusted ice like math. Brennan, retired. In a town like ours that can mean three things: he was sick, he was drinking, or he was done telling people what to do. His office light stayed off. The rectory curtain stopped twitching. If he left me anything, it was in the way he didn't call. Sometimes silence is the apology old men know best. I kept moving. Some nights I rode the bus to the end of the line just to see where the map stopped remembering me. Some nights I ended up at the Waffle House at 2 a.m., where the fry cook smoked by the back door and the waitress called everybody honey for the sake of survival. I'd order coffee and let it go cold while the neon buzzed above the jukebox, and I'd reread my notebook. Not rules, names. Every apprentice whose surname I'd ever heard the entity weaponize. Every kid it climbed into. Every ordinary person who didn't have anyone to read their name back to them when it mattered. I carried the notebook in my inside pocket, and when my wrist burned cold, I touched the cover like a talisman. The paper warmed faster than skin. I stopped carrying Brennan's old case map. Roads kinked in it, towns slid, intersections bent into angles that didn't belong in this county. Sometimes when I spread it under a gas station light, it didn't show me at all. The map had always been theater too, pretend control, pretend center. I learned to read the other map, the one you only see reflected in windows, which diners know your coffee order by the second week, which laundromats have a corner table that doesn't wobble, which neighborhoods leave porch lights on because they believe in each other, not because they're scared of what's on the sidewalk. That map holds. If anyone asks me now for one last rule, I give them the only sentence I trust. If a rule demands silence or sacrifice, it serves the thing. 2 Tuesdays after New Year's, I walked past the laundromat where I'd first felt the whisper try to lay its wire across my thoughts. Inside, the machines turned like planets. A father and his daughter sat under the vending machine light with a plastic chess set between them. He let her take back a move. She tapped each pawn before sliding it forward, a ritual that belonged to her alone. Ritual is not the enemy. It's the ownership that matters. My wrist tingled. The cold traveled up to the elbow like a weather front threatening hail. The neon sign in the window buzzed and flickered. It had flickered every night I'd walked by since October, a halo of broken pink over the word open. The father laughed at something the girl said. It was nothing, an everyday laugh, but it came from belly and throat and belief that this moment mattered more than whatever wanted it. The machines kept their rhythm. The chess pieces clicked soft as rain. The neon buzzed once, gathered itself, and went quiet. For a few seconds the room held no hum at all. Not entity hum, not electrical fill. Just human noise, breath, fabric, a pawn tapping a square, a muttered good move, A kid's small victorious exhale. The cold in my wrist receded to a line I could live with. I stepped back from the glass before they could see me and make that face parents make when they wonder if the bad thing is wearing ordinary clothes. I walked toward the bus stop where the schedule never matched the bus and let January sting my ears. When the wind dropped, you could hear the ice move. The sound traveled out from the pier and under the shore like a secret being kept by something big enough not to care whether we heard it or not. The lake would keep its secrets. The county would keep its debts. The church would keep its stories, and the archives would keep their static, and I would keep my list. You can't make a rule out of that, but you can carry it. And sometimes, in a town like ours under a sky this color of nothing, carrying is the only thing that breaks the chain.